Hello, my friends. Luiz Lima once again here, broadcasting from Orlando, Florida. You are on Kardec Radio, and this is Spiritism, a closer look. And don't forget, we do this every Wednesday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Tonight, we are going to take a closer look at what I call undermining self-evolution. We do this a lot, all of us, based on the current level of advancement that we are. So we undermine our own evolution. Of course, involuntarily, sometimes we don't kind of understand what we're doing. So, yeah, it just happens. So we wanted to bring this a little bit up for discussion. So when we think about evolution in general, evolution of the spirit, uh, evolution means there's got to be change. There is no evolution of any form of anything with no change. So change is part of evolution. And what happens is at times we are uh, reluctant about changes. We don't want changes, and anything that we do, uh, uh, in that sense, goes against evolution. Meaning, we are usually the ones who undermine our own evolution in the whole process. And we do this in several different ways, in several different flavors. There are, throughout our lives, if we were to kind of look back and in details, really in details, and being very critical, if you would, we would find times in our lives, in past years or past decades, that we would just say, oh my God, how can I do this, or why did I do that, or something like this, because we know it's not right. I don't like to use the words right and wrong, but we know it wasn't the best for us. I always say right and wrong depend on a reference. You tell me what the reference is, I'll tell you if it's right or wrong. So it kind of it's a harsh words, or two harsh words, right and wrong, when you consider studying spiritism. So at times we go totally against ourselves before we even go against someone else, because that's one of the ways that we undermine our own evolution, by making other people unhappy, by bringing vices over, and using our bad habits and evil attitudes towards everybody else, towards other people. So before it gets to them, we are already undermining our own process, our own evolution. So in order to illustrate our talk, I'm going to make use of a story that is really very famous in Greek mythology. Okay, let's take a, a, a quick stop here. What is exactly mythology? How can we understand it? We can define mythology as an allegorical narrative that tries to make a point, tries to pass some learning on. It's in a way, in several ways, it's similar to a parable, like Jesus used to to speak in parables. Those are little allegorical stories and narrative that are trying to make a point across. So, and it's very cultural dependent. So we have Roman mythology, Greek mythology, Egyptian, Nordic, and even Christian mythology. So the story that I'm going to bring in comes from the Greek mythology. And it's the story of a guy called Damastes. He was also called Procrustes. Procrustes is a word in Old Greek that means the stretcher, stretcher. So, what's the story on this guy, Procrustes? He was this supposedly a very bad person, and he had a house right on the way between Athens and Eleusis, which were two big cities. There were a lot of was a lot of traffic, people's traffic in between these two cities. People just walking by and going both ways. And he had a house right in the middle. Sometimes it was hard to do the whole, uh, uh, the whole journey in one day. So people would stop to rest, to get some sleep. So he had this house right in the middle of the way, and he would invite people to spend the night, so they could, just get rested, and next morning supposedly they would continue on their way. So, but that wasn't really what happened. He had this uh, way of bringing people in because he was a very bad person. So what he did is he had a bed for the visitor to sleep on, and he would put the visitor laying on the bed, and if the visitor was shorter in length than the bed, he would stretch the visitor all the way until the visitor dies. If the visitor was longer in length than the bed, he would amputate the excess length of the legs. Not very nice guy. So nobody would make it anyway. So nobody ever fit perfectly because that was his thing. He would place the people on the bed and say, if you fit perfectly, you're good. You're good to go, you get your sleep. If not, he was going to do one of these two things. For shorter people, stretch them, and for taller people, longer in length than the bed, amputate the excess length. Wow. However, what people didn't know is that he had two different beds with two different lengths. So he would always be able to choose the bed and give it to the visitor that he knew the visitor wasn't going to fit perfectly. So he would kill the person, either because the person was shorter or because he was taller. So, that's what he was doing for all the visitors he ever invited in. So one day, this guy, Theseus, knew about him, and he said, I'm going to fix this thing up. I'm going to kill this guy on his own bed. And he was really determined to it. He took the challenge. So he goes on, the way, and he gets to uh, Procrustes' house, and he says, I'm going to sleep here. I want to sleep here. So Procrustes said, "No, yeah, let me feed you on this bed." And Theseus said, "Hold on, not so fast. Before you do this, I'm going to propose to you, Procrustes, that I'm going to fit you in your own bed. However, if you don't fit, I'm going to do the same thing to you that you do to the other people." So Procrustes said, "Oh, you can do it because I have my own bed in which I fit perfectly to the dot. So if I fit perfectly, you're not going to do anything. You don't have to amputate my legs. You don't have to stretch me. So yeah, go ahead and do it." So he took the challenge. So Theseus said, "Okay, show me your bed." So Procrustes chose his bed. And Theseus said, "Okay, I'm going to put you on your bed. I'm going to tie you just to make sure that you don't move, and I can make sure that you fit to the dot on your own bed." So Procrustes said, "Yeah, sure, you can do that." So what he did is he ties Procrustes on his own bed, however, sideways. So when he did that, Procrustes was, he had an excess length because he was putting his own bed sideways. So Theseus had to amputate his legs and head, and it killed him. So that's a story. That's a very well-known story, and it brings a lot of reflection, because from this story we started using a new vocabulary, which is, for example, the word procrustian. So a procrustian situation is a situation where an arbitrary standard is used to measure your activities, your achievements, and set your standards, regardless of the harm that is the outcome. So, for example, a Procrustean solution is something that we create for all people and everything, every situation, to fit what we believe is right to us, or what we believe will serve us the purpose. So, for example, in more straightforward words, there's a law in every society. So instead of adjusting the attitude to conform with the law, to comply with the law, we change the law to comply with the attitude. That's procrustian. It's like, instead of, you know, the bed won't change. You have to change the length of your body to adjust to the bed, which is absurd. But we do the same thing. If you bring this to the moral field, we do the same thing, all of us, several times. It's like telling God what is right and wrong, to adjust to our needs so things fit our bed, our Procrustean bed. So people who are like this, they take these Procrustean attitudes all the time. So everybody around them, everything around them has to change to comply to what they supposedly need and want. So people like that, they are very controlling, and they suffer a lot. They are always suffering. They are always dissatisfied. They are always fighting against something they don't even know what it is, but it's themselves. So for these people, nothing is ever right. And they end up suffering and having all these diseases and illnesses because the body can't take that. The amount of control they want to put on the world to fit and comply to their own standards is absurd. So they dethrone God. They become, or they think they become, the reference. So everyone around them has to do what they want by their standards, regardless of harm that it implies into. It doesn't matter for them. So that's what the Procrustean story is. So our life, our life is represented in the story by this Procrustes bed. That's our life. So everybody, everything has to adjust to the way that we want to conduct our life. Relationships, people who relate to us in every possible situation, intimate, family, work, social, doesn't matter. They have to adjust to what we expect from them. They have to be tailored to comply with what we think it's right. And all the situations in our life have to change somehow. Somebody has to do something. Situations have to change so we comply, so they comply to what these people need. So their needs and their expectations are supposed to be fulfilled by everyone and everything. And that's why there's a lot of suffering, because they dethrone God, so they become, in their own world, this absolute truth. Everything else is not truth. If you don't comply to me, you're a liar. You're not lying. You lie all the time because I am the reference, I am the righteous guy, and you're not. This posture, this approach by itself denies evolution, because what has to change is not me or the person. What has to change is the world, are the situations, is God, is the work environment, is the religion, is the social club, is whatever. These things have to change. That's their approach, people like this, Procrustean people. So again, this posture or this approach denies evolution from the get-go. So it's a straight head-on with the way life should be. So these Procrustean solutions are something that make the person be stagnant and anti-evolutionary, if you will. So controlling people are essentially Procrustean people. They use Procrustean situations all the time. That's what they live by. And again, they suffer a lot. They want to have, not that they want, they are sure they have the last saying on everything. They have the last saying on anything. And they cannot be, you cannot contest. It's like a dogma. What they say, what they want, what they do becomes a dogma for everybody to follow. So they end up with these illnesses and diseases, and because they all the time, by the way, they demonstrate, they bring this, they signal their own undermining of the evolution they should have. So a Procrustean bed in the story, bringing again to our life, is this standard where everybody and everything has to conform exactly as these people need. So all the attitudes of people like this, all they do all the time, all their attitudes, when they take these attitudes, they are signing off their actions as Procrustes. They're basically saying, I am Procrustes myself, or because of this, they are the center of the universe. They won't change, which it's a bad thing, because they're going to start the incarnation and end the incarnation exactly on the same point. So it's going to be a lost opportunity for improvement, for moral improvement, for learning, for the intelligent principle to advance. So they deny advance to themselves. That's why I say they undermine their own evolution. A lot of these people do this, or most of these people, I would say, they do this without being aware of it. They don't, because if you're that shut down for the world, you don't create awareness of things. Because you don't need to be aware. The world has to be aware of you. The situations, the people around you, they have to be aware of you, not the other way around. So they will not, by not being aware, they won't get better. So they are on a constant, like I said, they are on a constant cycle of suffering after suffering after suffering, and undermining themselves all the time. So that's why Spiritism becomes an important thing. Spiritism, as we know, we've discussed this several times here on the program. Spiritism brings this new way of thinking, this new philosophy, this new way of facing life and the world, different than anything before, different than the Procrustean church that we have. The Inquisition is a Procrustean solution to a thing, which is, you know, I'm the one that tells you what you need to believe. If you don't believe it, you're wrong. So I'm gonna, get you set on fire. That's a Procrustean solution. So that's why, again, Spiritism becomes an important tool. It teaches us how to see the world from the other side of life, and that is only possible because Spiritism was not brought to us by one person, two people, three people. No, it was brought to us by a group of discarnate spirits, very advanced morally, much more than we are, most of them, and they bring their view from the other side of life. That would be very hard, if not impossible, for us from here to find out. So once we understand what Spiritism is all about, once we understand what happens on the other side of life, behaving in a Procrustean way makes no sense. It makes absolutely no sense. If you really believe in the message of Spiritism, which is ultimately the message of Jesus, if you don't believe that, it's going to be more difficult. But Spiritism is very clear on making us seeing things as if we were on the other side of life, which makes it a lot easier for us to understand the world and live by God's standards, not our standards. That's why in the beginning I said right or wrong, it's arguable. What is right, what is wrong? I can think that I'm right all the time, but you can think the same thing, and we can have different opinions on a subject or several. So who is right or wrong? I'm right on a subject, you're also right on the same subject. Because we are using different references. You are using your reference, and I have to comply to it. And I'm using my reference, and you have to comply to mine. So the two of us are Procrustean, using Procrustean way of thinking, because one has to comply the other. No, right or wrong depends on a reference. Real reference, true reference, it's only one. It's up there. It's the law that came from God. That you can compare to if you're right or wrong. So the whole thing about tonight's message or today's message is we need to get away from setting the standards and establishing the truth. Every time we establish the truth, we are undermining our own evolution to begin with, regardless of the consequences to everybody around. Doesn't matter. So it's an interesting story. It's very informative, but also very philosophical. It makes us think. Don't make anybody around you fit in or bad, because you're going to be suffering all the time. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. Spiritism, A Closer Look is going to be here next Wednesday again, 7:30 p.m. So I'll see you then. Be well.